So guys, Firestorm is finally here, and it's time for Battlefield to dive into the pool of Battle Royale games. It plays out in a fairly simple way, with everybody essentially running away from a very dangerous circle of fire that engulfs the perimeter of a section of the map, which is bloody huge, and then of course said players are running around looting, creating chaos and killing each other, with the hopes of being skilled, stealthy, and of course lucky enough to be the winner at the end. I've spent a pretty good amount of time on it to know the things that you should probably do and the stuff that's going to basically not get you killed, or at least not too quickly anyway. This video is going to run over a lot of the crucial tips to survive that firestorm and the other players hunting you down within it, combining both the basic tips that should be helpful if you're a bit of a Battle Royale noob, along with a few tips that might even help some of the veteran players as well. And hopefully it might even get you to the end of the game, to secure that V for victory. So in no particular order, my first tip, which is probably something that you might want to do straight away while you're chilling in the lobby, is to bump up that minimap size and make it a bit easier to see. You can do this in the gameplay settings, just like you can in the base game, and I'd advise you to not only make the minimap itself bigger, but also tweak the zoom radius too, so that it zooms out and you can see a lot more on it. The minimap isn't exactly a super useful tool to use for finding other players, which is half the battle, but it is great for seeing what's around and allows you to locate possible places of interest a lot easier, like buildings, which could be crammed full of loot or be housing a potential threat, sat in a window lining their Kar 98 sights up with your head. It's always best to know what's around, as it gives you more options to plan your next move, whether that be to seek out a new vantage point, dash to cover, see the distance between you and that deadly ring of fire, or even present a possible escape route from an attacking enemy. Tip number 2. Not all loot is in plain sight. In fact, some of the best loot is actually hidden away. When you're rummaging around in buildings, picking up random bits of kit scattered around across the floor, keep an eye out for those long coloured boxes with the symbols on top, as these things can often poop out some of the rarer bits of loot that are going to be more valuable. These are known as strong boxes and can be opened without having to do anything risky first. They also tend to be quite popular and can be easily missed if you're not looking out for them. Along with these strong boxes, you can also find and open safes too, which often contain even rarer loot still. Unlike the boxes though, you do need to hold a button down in order to crack them open, which does take a bit of time to do, leaving you very vulnerable. Should you attempt to go for these, listen out for nearby enemy footsteps and make sure you don't fall into a trap. Try and remember the location of the safe or strong box too, as their spawns are fixed and should be in the same place the next time you drop into another match, giving you an early advantage if you manage to beat the other players to them. Tip 3. Make sure to use sound to your advantage as much as you can. Halvoy is a very quiet place, sometimes a little too quiet, which sort of makes the whole experience even tenser. But there aren't really many ways of tracking enemies down in the environment, as you'll have to use your own senses as much as possible to spot them most of the time. Other than visibly being able to see them as they go about their business, you'll have to listen out a lot more than usual for things that might give away their position, or alert you of their presence if they're nearby. Audio cues such as the obvious gunshots and vehicle engines are dead giveaways, and will clearly let you know if someone's around, along with the slightly less obvious sound of footsteps if your opponent is in close proximity. Before you enter a building, listen out for footsteps, which might indicate that someone's already in there. And if you've got a suspicious feeling that someone's followed you into a building, stand still and listen for movement. Enemies are also going to be using these audio cues against you, so instead of barging away through doors, smashing windows and generally making a shitload of noise, sneak around and play more stealthily than normal, especially if you suspect an enemy is close by. You might also want to turn on the War Tapes audio option in the settings too, as this seems to amplify some of the sounds you need to listen out for. This leads me on to another safety tip that might help you locate a potential enemy player. Always look out for visible signs of enemy activity, especially around buildings and in popular areas. Little clues like open doors, broken windows and buildings with already open strong boxes and crates are all going to indicate that someone's definitely been there, and they might even still be. This is more important at the start of rounds where players are all desperately rushing into buildings and stocking up on weapons and ammo. It's also the time where most players are going to be alive and where they're eager to get their first kill with a freshly picked up gun. If you notice a door is open, be extra cautious about entering. There just might be a sneaky camper inside waiting for you to walk straight through that door. Another reason why you might want to close a door behind you if you're going to be using a building as a vantage point. Tip number 5. Try and find and equip 2 opposite weapons whenever you can. Firestorm allows you to hold two primary weapons of different or equal categories, so basically you can carry a Sturmgewehr and a Lee Enfield, and switch between them on the fly, if you wish. It's usually best to have a gun that can perform well in close quarters like a shotgun or SMG, in combination with something with a bit more range, like a rifle or light machine gun. That way you'll be able to take players on in any situation without getting caught out in a vulnerable position. It's also always best to keep switching between the two guns depending on your engagement range. So if you're entering a built-up area, whip out that rapid-firing Tommy gun. If you're moving across farmland, switch over to your Kar 98. Opposite weapons can also work well together in fights too, as you can punch a hole in your enemy's health bar with a bolt-action rifle, and then finish them off more reliably with an automatic weapon, without having to land another rifle bullet, which could potentially miss and leave you very vulnerable. Despite being an unstoppable force of sheer terror, it's pretty easy to forget that you're constantly being chased by a relentless wall of flame that destroys everything in its path and takes no prisoners. And it definitely doesn't care about you or your little mission to achieve victory. Basically, you'll want to move towards the blue ring and away from the red one as often as you can, otherwise that ring of fire is going to catch up to you and eat you up. It can often be best to try and get within the blue ring early before the firestorm even starts, and even try to anticipate where it might move to next, usually by moving away from the edge of the blue ring. Once you're within that safety zone, you can set up ambushes against other players as they run towards your position within the blue ring, mowing them down as they advance forwards. The firestorm makes it easy to predict where enemies are going to be heading, and you can also cut them off as they do. Just beware of campers when you do make it into the blue ring, as they're pretty much everywhere, waiting to advance to the next stage. At the start of the round when players are all dropping down from the sky, keep a very close eye on where other players are landing, how many are landing in a specific area, and where they're likely to rush to as soon as they touch the floor. Seems pretty obvious, but if an enemy or two lands in the same area as you without you realising, they're going to have a huge tactical advantage if they noticed you, and they'll most likely take you out unexpectedly right at the very beginning. At the same time, you can use this information to literally get the drop on other players, especially if you pull your parachute early and see where they land. If you're fast enough and plan your movements, you can rush to a gun, quickly grab it, and go and score an easy kill on a vulnerable unsuspecting enemy in the same area, that's stocking up on supplies and might not have noticed you dropping by. Playing aggressively might usually be one of the more fun ways to play Battlefield, testing your skill and reactions against other players, but just like in other Battle Royale games, it's usually not going to end well if you get too ballsy. Using defensive tactics is the better way to go in most cases, playing slowly and constantly adjusting to your environment one step at a time. Be wary about rushing into an area or chasing an enemy, as they might be anticipating your movements and might be sat around the corner, waiting to gun you down as you enter their sights. Enemies will often have more health, armor and ammo than yourself, and they might be wielding a stronger weapon for the range they're in. Don't get yourself into a false sense of security. Having full health and armor certainly doesn't make you invincible, as if someone takes you by surprise, you'll often be running away with your tail between your legs trying to survive that encounter. At the end of the day, you want to be the hunter as much as you can, rather than the prey. And the only way to really succeed at that is to not get spotted, by not drawing any unwanted attention to yourself. Linking in with my last tip, you want to essentially use cover as much as physically possible to ensure you're not going to get seen. The best way to survive is to stay hidden and undetected. And although the ever-moving wall of flame sort of prevents you from camping in the same spot, to a certain degree, you are going to have to leave the safety of cover at times and move away from buildings into rural territory. Whenever you do this, it's always best to stick to the trees and bushes whenever you can, hiding behind rocks and other low pieces of cover as you advance towards the next area. Even just by standing next to a tree, you'll be far less noticeable than if you were running across an open field like a headless chicken. And although bushes and trees can sometimes be few and far between, it's always best to try and blend in whenever you can, being extra careful when you need to run into the open to the next form of natural cover. Tip number 10. Stop every now and then to get your bearings and plan your next move. Although you're constantly going to be on the hunt for new swanky loot and enemy kills, sometimes it's best to literally just stop and look around. Perhaps take a look at your minimap, check to see what's in your inventory, whether you've got enough ammo and health to survive another skirmish, and what you need to prioritise and search for next to stay in the fight. Think about the risks but possible rewards upon entering a certain area, which might be cram-packed with enemies, and decide beforehand whether you think it's actually worth the trouble. If you're low on health and ammo, then you might be forced to search for more, but if you're already well stocked up, then it might not necessarily be the best idea. Whilst you've stopped to have a little ponder though, you might want to crouch in a bush or lie prone behind some cover, to avoid sticking out like a sore thumb. You'll blend in a lot better, and you'll be far less likely to get your head blown off by a bolt-action rifle. Just a bit of extra advice. While we're on the topic of thinking about things and playing with a more tactical mindset, although taking on enemies you come across might seem like the whole point of the game, don't be afraid to let an opponent slip by if you're simply not ready to fight them. Let's say you only have half a clip left and you're stuck with no armour and half a health bar. You're not exactly in a great position to kill someone who might be stocked up to the tits with their own portable arsenal and a bodysuit full of metal plates. You might also want to think twice about engaging an enemy tank if you're low on explosives, and if a squad of enemies outnumber you, letting them pass will probably be the more sensible option, unless you feel like you're in a position to take them all on. Just remember that you can always deal with enemies later on in a match when you're ready to do so, providing somebody else hasn't already taken them out first, of course. A lot of the time while you're on your travels in Halvoy, you'll come across other players having their own personal battles between each other, whether it be two lone players or two squads. Instead of getting involved and having a threesome, why not just let those enemies finish the little fight they're having first, and then just swoop in like a ruthless bastard to pick off the winner, who's probably going to be unprepared for your attack, being injured from the last fight with lower health and broken armour, unloaded weapons and less equipment. Go figure. If you start shooting whilst those enemies are fighting already, then you're doubling your efforts and potentially becoming another target for both enemies or squads to fire at. So in situations where you come across multiple players, be a vulture and don't make life hard for yourself. Tip 13. Always remember to watch your 6, especially if you're running solo. You're going to be navigating around the biggest Battlefield map ever made, up to this point anyway. And with enemies dropping down all over the gaff and popping up out of nowhere, often at times when you least expect them to, danger is literally everywhere. Don't just focus on what's in front of you and where you're heading. Keep checking behind every now and then to make sure you're not being followed. Check your surroundings, constantly be on high alert, and expect the unexpected, keeping in mind at all times that an enemy might be tracking you down, and trying to get within effective range of their weapon. If you're right next to an enclosing ring of fire, then this shouldn't be too much of a problem. Though you shouldn't really be right next to an enclosing ring of fire, for obvious reasons. Like I sort of mentioned in the last tip, you should never open fire on an enemy who's out of your gun's optimal range. So don't do anything stupid, like shoot at a bloke in the distance with a Suomi. Because ammo can often be quite scarce in Firestorm, and with different weapons being deadlier than each other within their own ideal ranges, it's always best to wait for the opportune moment to pull the trigger, especially with players being able to soak up more damage than normal. If you're patrolling the perimeter of an area and see someone scouring a nearby building, wait for them to leave said building and walk into the open, away from the things that might block your shots. Cover ground to get within range of your gun, and then let them have it when you get a clear shot. As a bonus tip, always remember to reload the second gun you pick up off the floor, as guns in the environment are unloaded, which could leave you in a bit of an awkward pickle when switching to it in a gunfight. And last tip of the day, just cheese your way to victory. If you really want to win, then the best way you can do so can often be done by being a pacifist, rather than a bloodthirsty killer. It's a bit of a boring tactic, and it's not exactly the way the game is designed to be played, but you can still technically end up winning by only taking down one player, the other survivor at the end, who's probably battled their way through quite a few enemies and seen some shit along the way. You can get over 10 kills and feel like a boss doing so, but that's not going to secure your place on the victory screen. Sneaking around, slowly accumulating more loot over time, and basically camping whenever you get a chance is a much safer approach to playing Firestorm, as every time you engage in a fight, you're technically cutting down your chance of survival, using up valuable ammo and loot that could be used at the end, or even potentially get yourself killed in said fight. All you've really got to do is just stay alive, make it to the next Firestorm phase, and watch the remaining player count drop one by one, as their numbers dwindle over time. Obviously you're gonna bump into enemies every now and then, but sometimes the best way to win is just by letting the other players on the server do all the dirty work for you. And unfortunately, the winners are often the guys that just sit around in bushes and only engage when they really have to. Moral of the story, violence isn't always the answer. So there we have it folks, a bunch of survival tips to help you out the next time you hop into the storm. Hope this video helped you out. If it did, you know what to do. And subscribe for loads more Battlefield content coming pretty soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in that next video.